So, I'm back here with my little friend here, Mr. 3x damage and 69% burn himself. I actually checked back in it a little while ago, and it wasn't 69%, it was 60%. So I don't know if his burn's just 60% or not, or if it's just 50% and there is some outside buff doing something to it. Could have been something like that, but I'm not too sure. First of all, before we get into the statistics, I'm going to quickly check and make sure that he's still doing 3 times his damage. Okay, so now we have all our farms max, and we just gotta get this guy down and wait for the specific enemy with a shit ton of health. So here's an 800,000 health salamander summon, and instantly killed. So I think it's safe to say that it still happens. Good, that's all I needed to know. I have myself a little sheet right here, and this is where we're going to be doing our calculations. First of all, let's get the 2 units down. Next, I'm going to be using every stat from specifically the wiki. So the wiki will have like the base stats, they're gonna, be like fairly low stats, and that's mainly just because I don't want to have like anything that varies between the two, even though there could be some from the wiki itself. But we're gonna just take its last attack damage stat. So we've got 170,582 for Ghost-Kun. And we've got 154,628 for Sasuke. So that's their damage, right? That's their damage. We're gonna get down their SPA as well. Ghost-Kun has 12 seconds. Sasuke has 9. Next, we're going to take in consideration the max buff they can get, which is 3 times from Griffith and Wenda or Leafa, whoever. That's the max buff they can get. Now on top of that, max burn buff that they could get will vary as 3 for Ghost-Kun and 6 for Sasuke. This is taking into account apparently how max buff from Griffith and Wenda actually multiply burn percentage as well as taking into account the eye relic, which doubles the duration. Next up, we're going to take note of how many ticks of burn they actually deal, with Ghost-Kun having 4 usually, but 8 with the relic, and Sasuke having 10 usually, but 20 with the relic. And right after that, we're going to also get down an added multiplier, which will be the 3 times damage that Ghost-Kun has for his last attack. So now, with all of this taken down, we can actually get to the calculations because we have all the variables we actually need to do this. So first of all, let's get DPS, right? Or no, we're going to actually start with buffed damage. So to get this, we have to do some funny sheet function calculations, which we'll need to do, not divide actually. We'll need to just do multiply B2, which will be the damage value, by the max buff of B4. And that will give us, both of them, how much damage they're going to be doing with Griffith and Wenda buff. So now that we have these variables down, we can just straight up go into DPS. Okay? So let's see. We're gonna have to divide B9 by B3. So this is their normal damage DPS, right? Now obviously we have to factor in the burn as well. So we have max burn buff down, which includes how much damage of burn compared to their normal damage they're going to be doing. Well, compared to their buffed damage. So we're going to take that into account. But before we do that, we have to take into account the multiplier buff that we mentioned earlier, B7. Because that's going to be the 3 times damage that Ghost-Kun has on his last attack compared to his display damage. The reason we're doing that separately from buff damage is the fact that his burn doesn't scale with the 3x damage that he has. So now we have this function here. So now we have to add to that, right? To add the burn damage that he's doing. And to get the burn damage, we're going to just take the buffed damage. Well, I'll have to do multiply. Gonna take the buffed damage that they have, B9, and we're going to multiply that by B5. And this gives us how much DPS they're doing, including the burn damage. So we can also just bring this down and do burn damage. So then we can just make this a little simpler. And to get that, we're just going to multiply these two together. And we're just going to copy that. So this is the amount of burn damage that both units will be doing. And all we're doing is adding that burn damage to this. So it's the same value. So now we're going to send it over and send it over. And now we can compare the two. Buffed damage, Ghost-Kun will have more. If we take into account the burn damage, on the other hand, Sasuke has way more burn damage. And DPS, we can see there's a very clear winner here. Sasuke having about 100,000 more DPS. So, pretty much, that's all there is, right? It's just Sasuke is the better unit, has way more burn, and is just overall better. So, there we have it, right? Sasuke is just better. Well, that would be the case if we did the calculations for burn damage correctly. But the only issue is that we didn't. Because this is the way that most people, or at least everyone that I've seen, calculates it. But that's not correct. Damage per second directly means a calculation of the rate of damage performed by a particular weapon, spell, character, job class in the period of 1 second, used as a standard measurement of effectiveness in order to compare the relative effectiveness of one set of equipment or one character build against another. So, why is this incorrect currently? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's the fact that the burn, we have one variable that we have not used at all. And to actually get an accurate damage per second, we need to use that variable. And that would be the burn ticks. Because currently, we're comparing the burn against their normal SPA. And if we do that, it's very rigged towards Sasuke since his burn tick is way longer than his SPA, giving him a very big upwards curve in DPS due to that. So now, to fix this, how we have to factor this is we need to add a new variable, okay? First of all, we're going to change this to damage DPS. Now we're going to have burn DPS. And we're going to completely take away the burn damage, addition, all that, because we don't need that now. We're going to put it on both sides. So now we can see how much DPS their normal base attack damage is actually doing. So now, just for the ease of not having to write all of this all over again, we're going to bring it down. We're just going to change the variables that we have. Now from this point, it's quite simple to figure out the rest. All we need is the B10. We don't need to do any multiplication since we do that already with the burn damage. And we divide that by the burn tick. So this will give the amount of burn damage that will be occurring every single second if you have the enemy burning. So now we copy that over, and, well, would you look at that? Shockingly, when we factor in the burn tick, Ghost-Kun is actually doing more damage. Now we're not quite done yet. I'm just gonna bring this down because we still have to get the total DPS, and all that will be is adding both DPS together to get the total. And now, here we have the actual DPS if we factor in the burn tick. As we can see, Ghost-Kun is now the one doing about 130,000 more DPS than Sasuke. But it goes a bit deeper than that even, because Sasuke can actually, or well, both of them can, but since Sasuke's burn tick is so long, he can easily get a second burn stack at the exact same time as his first one. So if we factor that in, all we have to do is change this value to double the burn damage right here. If we factor that in, now Sasuke is doing about 10,000 more DPS. And then for 2 ticks at very late into his attack, he can actually have 3 ticks of burn going at the exact same time, which would, you know, bring him up to about 150,000 more DPS. But that's very situational since it's going to be only for about 2 ticks, if even 2 ticks. So that's what we have. It's very, very situational. I'm going to actually just make this a value. Another little value, just so that I don't have to keep changing that. We're going to make burn stack. Ghost-Kun, since he attacks longer than his burn tick, he's never going to have the chance to stack like Sasuke can. Although, don't get me wrong, he still can stack with other units of Ghost-Kun. He can't stack on top of those. Sasuke just can stack on top of his own burn that he has going on. Now, taking that into account, we can see what the actual statistics for DPS are. So, who's better? That's the real question. And to put it simply, they're both very even. Because if you want a very constant DPS, then you should go with Ghost-Kun, for sure. Because he doesn't rely on really long burn ticks and trying to get multiple burn from the same Sasuke on top of each other to deal more and more damage. But if you don't care about that and you just want cold hard damage, then you can go for Sasuke. Since he will be doing more, it will just take more of a setup and it won't be as constant as it would be if you had Ghost-Kun. Now, I just want to point out the fact that the reason why I'm calculating burn DPS as a second factor rather than just with the damage DPS is because it doesn't matter which one deals more. It's the exact same thing as normal DPS. It's very reliant on the SPA. It's the same reason as if you have a unit that has 500,000 damage who attacks every 10 seconds, as opposed to a unit that has 300,000 damage that attacks every 5 seconds. The unit with 3,000 damage is going to be doing more DPS even though it's less damage. That's the exact same in how I'm calculating the burn DPS. Because we need to factor in this tick, otherwise it's going to be factoring in with SPA instead of how the burn actually applies itself. Put simply, they're both really good. They're both really strong and the burn is just insane. I preferably am going to be sticking with Ghost-Kun just because I prefer the constant that he has going on, as well as his AoE size of the cone, as well as how fast that he factors in his burn damage from ticks. But if you don't have him and you have Sasuke, then it's fine to keep him. Sasuke is very on par, they're both very on par, and it's really just whoever you have that you should be using. There's no very clear answer who's better than the other, since it's very situational as to which one you'll have and which one you'll be using. But if you are a new player and you want to get the easier one, I'd say Ghost-Kun, since the only thing you have to do to evolve him is challenges as opposed to getting to the last stage, doing a shit ton of legend stages, and on top of that, doing challenges for the star fruits. So in conclusion, if you have one or the other, stick with them. If you don't have any, I'd recommend Ghost-Kun since he's just easier to get, quicker to get, and overall more constant. And another thing I want to add is if Ghost-Kun loses his 3x multiplier, he's still going to be doing more than Sasuke if he hasn't stacked on top of his burn yet. Just to factor that in. But if he doesn't lose it, he's going to be well above if he hasn't factored into this stack. Not to mention that stats on these units will very much vary, and even the slightest bit of percent increase or decrease will drastically change how this goes. Like, for example, if I just made Ghost-Kun have 10,000 more, then you can see he's immediately doing more than Sasuke would while he has 2 burn stacks at the same time, just by a 10,000 increase. So that's all I have today. Just wanted to answer all of the people asking which one of them is better, even though there's pretty much not that much of a difference between the two. Both of them are equally good and very useful. So if you have one or the other, keep them. If you don't have any, your choice. Thanks.